It's been 2 months or so since my last video on Burma, otherwise known as Myanmar. In that, I examined the situation predominantly in the southeast of the country and expressed my concerns for the state of the pro-democracy forces engaged in conflict with the military junta that seized control of the country back in 2021. A particularly important factor in the conflict, and one I have harped on about before, is neighbouring China and the influence it exerts on many of the factions in the conflict, including the military junta. And this influence has just been graphically demonstrated and boosted. In October 2023, a powerful coalition of ethnic forces, the Three Brothers Alliance, launched a stunningly successful offensive, Operation 1027, that seized a huge amount of territory from the junta in northern Shan state. So successful was the operation that it engendered breathless observations that perhaps the junta's days were numbered and that a complete collapse of the military was on the cards. 2 years later, the reality is very different, and the plans of the true winners in this conflict, China, are becoming plainer to see. Operation 1027 saw multiple ethnic resistance organisations, EROs, and People's Defence Forces, PDFs, work together to achieve the success that the offensive did. But the core strength of the operation lay in the aforementioned three brothers. Composed of the Arakan Army, the AA, the Taung National Liberation Army, the TNLA, and the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, the MNDAA. Yes, if you want to follow Burma, you've got to love an acronym. Of these, the Taung and the MNDAA were the surprise, as they had been comparatively minor ethnic groups through most of Burma's extremely long-running civil conflict, but with 1027 demonstrated that they were suddenly very capable and well-equipped forces capable of taking on the military junta and winning. This was essentially because the two forces had strong links with China. The MNDAA is composed of Kokang, ethnic Chinese who emigrated to Burma in the 19th century, but who maintain strong family and ethnic links with their kin across the border. The Taung also have communities in China, and it seems that the Chinese, if not directly investing efforts into equipping and possibly training both groups directly themselves, certainly allowed it to happen in the run-up to 1027. This is hardly a surprise. China has long supplied both the central military in Burma and various ethnic groups in the region of the country that border them. Put simply, China has always made serious money from the conflict in Burma, buying precious commodities at bargain rates in exchange for weapons and ammunition that the various groups need to fight one another. But the coup has provided the Chinese Communist Party with the perfect chance to tighten their grip on the country politically, economically, and militarily. After Operation 1027, which put extreme pressure on the military junta, the Chinese have been able to increase their influence on the military dramatically, with the regime now heavily reliant on China for their survival and becoming effectively a client state. However, the Chinese then faced the issue of reining in the other parties, who, with no love for the junta, were determined to carry on the offensive. It's taken the Chinese Communist Party a while, but it appears they have finally managed it. On the 29th of October, the TNLA announced that they had signed a ceasefire with the junta, agreeing, in principle at least, to returning the towns of Mogoke in Mandalay and Mongmit, Shan State, back to the junta. This follows on from a previous ceasefire signed by the MNDAA, and all this means that the heavy commitment that the junta was making in northern Shan State and Kachin states to deal with these powerful opponents has now been released to deal with some of the other issues that the military faces in the rest of the country. Indeed, as of the start of November, reports are that junta bombing of areas under the control of the Arakan Army in the west of the country have increased substantially since the ceasefire was announced. Combined with increasing support for the junta from China and to a lesser degree Russia, this is an unfortunate turn of events for resistance forces. So how did China manage this? Well, on top of cutting off resistance supply routes coming over from China itself, local CCP officials made public threats against the TNLA when they refused to rein in their offensive operations against the junta. To place pressure on the MNDAA, the Chinese are alleged to have arrested the Kokang leader after summoning to a meeting last year. These actions by Beijing, combined with the heavy and indiscriminate use of air power by the junta, has now forced the Kokang and the Taang to drop out of the fight. The Taang state that in recent months they have seen a significant qualitative improvement in junta forces equipment supplied by China, as well as alleging that they have been subject to attack by chemical weapons. In addition to this, the powerful Wa ethnic group has apparently halted selling weapons and munitions to other anti junta forces, again, presumably at the instigation of China, who have a huge amount of influence on that group. This has the potential to be a serious problem for anti junta forces, as Wa made weaponry, particularly their assault rifles and rocket launchers, are seeing use against junta forces all across the country. Now, it is important to point out in regard to the ceasefires with the TNLA and the MNDAA that both organisations have expressed that they expect to resume fighting at some point in the future. And as already said, the TNLA have not yet withdrawn their forces from the towns in question at the time this video goes live. But to be honest, with the CCP now holding so much sway over these groups and the junta, it seems likely that action taken by any of these actors against one another will be at the behest of China if one of them starts getting a bit too defiant. And the latest move by the junta to assist China's goals in the country would seem to reaffirm this. In early November, it was announced that the military was establishing a committee to expedite implementation of Chinese development projects, with particular emphasis on those connected to the Yakpu deep sea port in Rakhine State. This is a critical strategic priority for China, as it will provide them access to the Indian Ocean by bypassing the choke points of the Straits of Malacca, the interdiction of which would be a key US strategy in the event of conflict between America and China. And this committee is no simple affair of minor functionaries, being composed of the highest officials in the junta and chaired by its leader, Min Aung Hlaing himself. It is not just in the military, economic, and political fields that China's influence continues to grow, nor even just in the north of Burma. In the south, Chinese criminal gangs with roots in the infamous 14K Triad Gang continue to operate in Karen State, principally around the town of Mayawadi on the Thai border. The Triads operate a vast scam network that nets them billions of dollars in revenue every year. And now, according to a report by the US China Economic and Security Review Commission, are now actively targeting Americans more because the gangs, too, are now falling into line with Chinese government policy. Indeed, as one former official from the US State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs told the Washington Post, there's a growing Venn diagram between the authorities and Chinese organised crime groups overseas, where there's clear knowledge of each other's activities, a kind of co-awareness and cooperation. These criminal enterprises have allowed the Chinese Communist Party to expand their influence into areas that have traditionally been outside of their sphere, with the scam centres around Mayawadi providing a perfect example. Here, what is effectively a joint venture between the triads, the junta, and their local Karen allies, split the proceeds, and this too is now playing a substantial part in the military situation in the country. The group in charge of Mayawadi calls itself the Karen National Army and are Karen turncoats, previously called the Karen Border Guard Force. But again, though once a minor faction in the conflict allied with the military, their new wealth has turned them into a major player, with local experts believing that they can now field a force of perhaps as many as 20,000 well-equipped troops, making them one of the most powerful factions in the country now. And they are in the habit of throwing their weight into whichever cause suits their interests best at the time, currently fighting against the Karen National Liberation Army alongside the junta and helping the military take back the critical bases it has lost along the Thai-Myanmar border and the strategic Asian Highway 1. In the west of the country, the junta has also stepped up its ground operations. In Chin State, the military is advancing 3 columns into areas that are held by the Chin Defence Force, displacing a reported 30,000 people in this attack alone. The estimation is that the junta hope to reclaim the roads linking Burma and India, which are in CDF hands, as well as securing areas that it wants included in the election that the military want to hold later this year. So, to be honest, things are grim, but it is not all bad news. Despite the ceasefire by the TNLA, the local PDFs allied to them in the towns under pressure have made it plain that they fully intend to carry on fighting to keep the military out of their areas, should the TNLA be pressured out. It remains to be seen if they can manage that without the support of the larger EROs, but the refusal of the PDFs to bow to the junta is a classic example of the sort of resistance that the military has managed to engender in the majority of the country's population. Further cooperation is certainly needed between the resistance forces if they are to resume the offensive, and in this, General Bourgeois, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Karen National Liberation Army, has made some interesting points recently. Speaking online at a conference being held in Australia, General Bourgeois said that a more cohesive alliance between the various PDFs and EROs was expected soon, and that it would have a unified command structure. Now, seasoned Burma watchers have heard this one before, but perhaps not with as much certainty as was expressed on this occasion. And General Bourgeois is certainly the sort of person to be fairly confident in making this prediction, as he is a significant figure within the KNLA and, by extension, within the anti-junta forces. So that is likely one situation to keep a close eye on in the future.